Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today we're going to be talking about the new Canon RF 24mm f1.8 IS STM macro. If you're new to the channel, I am a portrait and lifestyle photographer based out of Orlando, Florida, and I've been shooting with the Canon RF system since it came out with the original Canon EOS R. This lens I've owned for about a week, so this is not a review, it is my first impressions. I haven't shot anything professionally with this lens, but I have been using it for the last week, taking it with me everywhere, taking snapshots, and I have my first impressions. Like I do with all my videos, I will be including some sample raw photos for you to download in the link below, and all the photos you will see in this video have been edited with my preset, which is also available in the link down below. I'm going to cover three things: build quality, image quality, and autofocusing speed. With that said, let's kick things off. So build quality. If you have used any of the Canon RF budget lenses, even though I hate calling them budget lenses because they are budget lenses in the RF system, but they're still not really budget prices. They're kind of in the mid-range, but we'll call them budget lenses because that's the cheapest Canon offers. If you've used any of them before, you know exactly what to expect. It's made out of plastic, it's lightweight, it's small, and Canon's pretty much made all these lenses macro lenses. So now you have the Canon RF 16 f2.8, the Canon RF 24 1.8, the 35 1.8, the 50 1.8, and the 85 f2. The only two lenses there that aren't macro are the 16 2.8 and the 50 1.8. Ironically, if you look at the 16 2.8 and the 50 1.8, they share the exact same body, or it looks like they do. When you look at the RF 24 1.8, it looks identical to the RF 35 1.8. They look the same, they feel the same. The RF 35 is a little heavier, but if you use a 35, you know exactly what to expect with the 24mm. This lens does have an AF manual focus switch and an image stabilization on-off switch, and overall, I think it has decent build quality. I've owned this 35 1.8 since it came out. I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. Has not failed me. Even though it's made out of plastic, it shows no wear and still looks in mint condition, and I've used this lens a lot. I've traveled with it, shot weddings with it, and it's held up just fine. So from a build quality perspective, I don't think the 24mm is bad whatsoever. It's gonna stand the test of time. This new Canon design doesn't necessarily feel great in the hands because it's just so plasticky, but it has proven to be durable with this 35 1.8. Now, they look the same, they feel the same, they act the same, kind of. I think Canon has updated its AF motors, and I'm getting ahead of myself. We're gonna talk about that in the AF section, but they've definitely updated the AF motors, and this lens is now quieter. So the RF 35 1.8 was a noisy lens. The 24 is a lot quieter, and I'll try to put some sound samples here so you can hear the difference. But they've definitely updated something where the lens just is a little quicker and quieter. So overall, for build quality, I have no complaints. This lens does retail for $599, and I feel it's a good value for what you're getting. Let's talk about image quality. And for the image quality section, let's go ahead and screen share my computer and take a look at some images and some findings, because you'll see, I won't get ahead of myself. So let's go ahead and check out some images. Okay, so diving into Lightroom, here we have our first image. I shot this in pretty decent lighting, f2.8, ISO 100. Again, I have edited these photos with my preset, and you can check that down below. Looking at the image, if I zoom in, you're gonna see that in the center of the image, it's a very sharp lens. Now, I did shoot this at 2.8, you'll see why, but overall, from a sharpness perspective, this lens is performing like the previous budget-friendly RF lenses, which means it is extremely sharp and you're not gonna have any kind of sharpness complaints. But just like the previous RF lenses, the budget ones, you're gonna see that there is some purple fringing here on the edges. On this image, it's not so bad. And I shot this image purposefully at 2.8 because I knew if this lens performed anything like the other budget lenses, at 1.8, I was gonna have tons of purple fringing. So at 2.8, you still have some purple fringing here on the leaves. It's not extreme, but you still have it. It's a little disappointing because usually with a 35 at 2.8, it starts clearing up a little bit more, but you have it here on the 24mm. Let's go ahead and look at another image. Looking at another image, again, we're gonna zoom in. You're gonna see in the center of the frame, this lens is sharp. There's tons of detail. I didn't say, I actually shot all these images with the Canon EOS R5, so I'm pushing this lens because we're using all 45 megapixels here. And you can see that, again, from a sharpness perspective, this lens performs. You will not be disappointed. In this photo, again at 2.8, not as much purple fringing. So overall, pretty happy with the image, pretty happy with the lens performance. I'm gonna go ahead and go to a other image I took. This one I was trying to test its macro capabilities, and I try to get pretty close. This lens actually focuses a lot closer than this, but I wanted to see, does image quality degrade as you kind of get closer? And you can see here, first of all, gotta love the colors. Zooming in, there is gonna be tons of detail. This lens is sharp. I shot this at 1.8 and overall, nice image, nice colors, nice contrast, and sharp photo. So if you're looking for a sharp 24mm lens, you're gonna enjoy this one. And here's where we're gonna go into some of the negatives. Before I do that, I actually shot this lens for the first time at night, and I got some pretty cool long exposures like this fireworks photo. And when I took this photo, I got super excited. The image quality looked great, the detail, the contrast. I expected this lens to be punching outside its weight class. I took this other image, again at night, really happy with the performance. This image I took handheld, and you can see here, half a second exposure, f1.8, handheld. And when I zoom in, let's let it load, it is tack sharp. So when I first used this lens at night, I was really impressed with the image quality, the image stabilization, and I thought we were gonna have a banger of a lens. If you've been following my channel, I've always said this. I'm the type of photographer who will never shoot lens charts, who will never look at the corners of an image and complain, because who does that in the real world? So I'm not the type of photographer who nitpicks image quality in the corners or any of that. This lens is the first lens that I looked at the corners and I'm like, something seems off. And let me show you what I saw and what kind of led me to me kind of seeing what this lens was doing. And you're gonna see how bad this lens is with distortion and how much lens corrections is going on behind the scenes to make this lens a usable lens. This really surprised me. Let's take a look at this photo. So looking at this photo, I've edited it with my preset. I've done some correction to straighten the lines. But in this photo is when I initially saw like some smearing here in the corner. So I zoomed in, and as you can see here, I did shoot this at 1.8, but you can see how the corner sharpness is pretty terrible. It looks just, like there's Vaseline here in this corner. And looking at this other corner, same thing. Then I started thinking, okay, this really caught my eye. What are lens corrections doing here? So I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the lens corrections. And this is the official Canon profile. And just take a look at this. This is crazy. Ready? 1, 2, and you can see how the original image is extremely distorted. And again, I'm not sure this is called pincushion distortion, but you can see there's tons of it going on. There's tons of warping. And what's interesting here, if we zoom into the corners, take a look at this. So here we have this fence, and here we have this I don't even know what to call it, right? But let's take a look at that. I'm gonna go ahead and enable the corrections again, and you're gonna see how much it corrects. So by clicking the corrections, look how much it crops into the image. This is insane. So here, again, with the profile corrections on, you can see just kind of the edge of this fence. Turning them off, look how much information you're losing with the lens corrections. This tells me that this lens is more of a 22 millimeter, maybe 23 millimeter. And with lens corrections, you're cropping into a 24 millimeter frame. Let's take a look at another image. So here we have another image. This one's shot at 2.8 with lens corrections on. Let's go ahead and click them off. Again, look how much information you're losing by enabling corrections. If I zoom in here on the corner, you can see that, first of all, there's still tons of vignetting here at 2.8, and you can see how there's kind of these two peaks here in these mountains. By enabling the corrections, you completely lose those two peaks. That's how much this lens is correcting with profile corrections. I think that's wild. Now, I'm the type of photographer who will never disable lens profile corrections. I always have them enabled. That doesn't necessarily bother me too much. I just have to say I've never seen such an extreme use of profile corrections on a lens, specifically a lens at this price point. $600 is budget, but is not cheap either. So from an image quality perspective, this lens is extremely sharp in the center. And if you're a professional photographer shooting landscapes or shooting prints or any type of image where you actually value the information in the corners, you want to get a nice image corner to corner, this lens will be very hard to recommend because it's not that great. Again, for I think snapshots, like this type of work that I'm doing here, the lens is fine. This is not a photo I'm gonna print, or people who see on Instagram won't even be able to tell the corners or the profile corrections going on. But I think if you're a professional and you're shooting landscapes, you're shooting to print, or you're shooting anything that is not in the center of the frame, this lens is not that great. And that is so surprising to me because I have enjoyed and loved almost every new RF lens. I felt that almost every new RF lens has been optically great. And in this one, I feel like Canon has taken some serious shortcuts because, as you can see, this is clearly a 22, 23 millimeter lens, and there's so many corrections going on to make it look decent. It's a little disappointing. It almost feels like they took shortcuts with the optical formula and design, maybe to reach a certain size or price point, or maybe to fit the same bodies at 35, 1.8 to save on cost. Overall, I feel like they took shortcuts here. You could see it, and I'm just not sure how I feel about it. I'm not even sure I could recommend this lens because of that. That being said, this lens also does have some cool features like the macro capability. And let me show you a quick macro image so you can see how close you can get and the image quality to expect. So here I took a picture of my new G-Shock. I got as close as I could on this next image so you can see the details. Zooming in, you can see that, again, this lens is extremely sharp down the middle. From a focusing macro perspective, you can get super close on your subject and still get pretty good results. It's not a one-to-one macro, but I think in a pinch, having this lens and having that macro functionality is helpful. And again, when you're shooting with the R5, you can crop in and you can get some nice images cropping in and kind of that macro functionality. Let's move on to autofocus and then we'll wrap up this video. So with autofocus, like I mentioned earlier, this lens has been improved. So because it has a macro functionality, this lens has a wide range of focusing distances. That does not make it slow. So I know a lot of people with the RF 85 f2 don't like it because it's a slower lens. This lens in general has felt extremely fast and snappy to me. It feels faster than the 35 1.8. So if you think that lens is slow, this one is a bit faster, but not night and day faster. They've also improved the focusing motors. So they are a lot quieter, which means for video, you should have a quieter lens and maybe not pick up as much noise when the lens is focusing. And that's all I gotta say for my first impressions. I haven't shot video with this lens yet. I'm primarily a photographer, so I won't be able to comment too much there. But to wrap up this video, these are my first impressions. And to sum it up, this lens at $599 is a mixed bag. If you're a hobbyist, if you're a photographer who just wants a wide angle lens in their bag, who is primarily gonna shoot all their subjects in the middle of the frame, I can recommend this lens. You're gonna get great sharpness, great versatility, a small package, great IS where you can shoot, as you saw in my photos, as low as half a second and still get sharp photos. If you're a professional, if you're shooting paid work, if you're gonna shoot images where your subject might be off to the left or right side of the frame, if you're gonna be printing large images where the corners matter, I cannot recommend this lens. Canon definitely took shortcuts to fit in this body, this optical formula, this price point, whatever they were trying to accomplish, and you can definitely see it. So from a performance perspective, unfortunately, if you like the 35 1.8, I think that lens does perform a lot better than the 24 1.8. And I would probably put this at the bottom of the barrel along with the 50 1.8 and the 16 2.8 that Canon released earlier this year. If you own this lens, what are your thoughts? If you don't own this lens and you kind of want to play with the images, like I said, I am including some in the link down below for you to play with. Check them out. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one, guys. Peace.